Now we got it.
Right. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our meeting for worship. Um, as usual, Lynn will open with some music.
Is that coming through for anybody else?
Thank you, Lynn. Do we have any announcements this morning? Hearing none, I will put in a quick plug. For a while back, we had talked about the possibility of having some type of class on Quakerism, or just kind of an opportunity for a class outside of meeting for worship sometime during the week on a weeknight evening. So I think I was hoping to bring that up at next month's monthly meeting once more. So I'm bringing it up this morning in case if folks are interested in doing something like that, if you could maybe just reach out and express some interest in it. I'm going to suggest, not that this would necessarily be what we would have to do, to maybe use the book by Marcel Martin that I mentioned previously, Our Life is Love, about the Quaker spiritual journey. It comes with questions at the end of each chapter that would, I think, be helpful if folks were interested, or we could explore some other option as well. So again, I plan to bring that up at the April monthly meeting. And in case folks can't be present for that, I wanted to mention it so that anybody could reach out and again express your interest in such a group and or any other ideas aside from what I just suggested. How about joys and concerns?
We need to keep Brent and Donna and Donna's brother Ron in our thoughts and prayers. I don't know the whole story. Brent has just kind of texted me a couple of little pieces of it. But Ron, who we know has dementia, has fallen and hurt his back, and he's been getting treatments for it, and he's in the hospital. And so Brent and Donna are with him today rather than being here with us. So we should keep them all in our prayers.
I have some good news. Last Tuesday, I had a biopsy on my thyroid and found it to be benign and no cancer.
Look at the smile. I attended the memorial gathering for Rosemary Kellum yesterday, who had died on her 101st birthday, which was also Friday the 13th. Had a great time visiting with the family. Sylvia's message last Sunday about good and good enough. One of the quotes that was attributed to Rosemary is this: I may not be perfect, but parts of me are excellent. I may not be good, but parts of me are excellent, which I thought was an amazing way to look at a good person, a good life, and a good philosophy.
As always, we have much to be thankful for and mindful of. I think Lynn has a. Oh, do you have something, Steve or Catherine? Oh, okay. I just saw the hand go up. I think that Lynn, you have an introduction of our speaker.
Well, as all of you know, Norma has been under the weather for a while. She is doing much better, but a part of her being under the weather was asking me if I would get worship leaders, since I do the newsletter and would be the one who wanted the information anyway. So I did that for March, and we happened to have an extra Sunday in March, and nobody assigned to it. So I reached out to Emily, whom I've known for a while now, and a number of us have interacted with her in various ways, and asked her to bring the message this morning. As she told some of you earlier, she's a traveling friend. And knows friends from all over the place. I get her blog and am just always surprised at where she pops up next and the things that she's doing, and the things I've witnessed her to do have been excellent. So I'm looking forward to what she has to share with us, and whatever she wants to share about herself in the process of doing that. Meanwhile, we'll sit her down and Emily can speak to us out of the silence as she feels led.
Good morning. It's good to be with West Newton friends. This is a group that I've heard about a great many times. And I did visit your meeting house once with Sylvia, but none of you were in it at the moment that I went to visit that meeting house. I'm sitting here this morning at my parents' house in Utah. I live on the road full time and just came from Mexico, but I'm getting to visit with family. And I'm kind of in between the bed and the wall in the upstairs guest room with my notebook propped up on a wrinkle in the comforter. And this is, in fact, not the strangest place from which I have ever brought a message to a meeting, um, which says something about what ministry is actually like, I think, for a lot of people. I started thinking about different types of ministry and the experience of ministry and what that means among friends when Lynn asked me to come and speak today. And one of the friends I was thinking about is somebody that some of you might have met called Melinda Wenner Bradley. My friend Melinda has spent time in all kinds of places around the world. She tells stories. That's really at the heart of what Melinda does. She gets down on the ground with people of all ages, and she works with a program called Faith and Play and tells stories that we can all learn from stories from Quaker history, stories from biblical history, with these amazing props and beautiful little dolls and sand and those sorts of things. Melinda is a teacher. That is the type of ministry from which she comes. And it's not just about sharing facts, but it's also about awakening individual people and helping us to grow into the next step of our spiritual development. One of the passages about what is a minister and what is ministry that we come across in the New Testament is Ephesians 4:11 through 13. It's one you will have heard before, I'm sure. So Christ himself gave the apostles, the prophets, the evangelists, the pastors, and the teachers to equip his people for works of service, so that the body of Christ may be built up until we all reach unity in the faith and in the knowledge of the Son of God and become mature, attaining to the whole measure of the fullness of Christ. At that beginning of that message, it gives us some types of ministers. Melinda, like I said, is a teacher. I encountered the impact of a pastor once when I was in North Carolina waiting in line to get some photocopies done at a UPS store. I didn't even meet the pastor in question. In fact, I later found out that he has died, but I was behind a man in line who told a story about, he found out that I was a Quaker. And he told me a story about a Quaker he remembered. He said that when he was 12 years old, he went to an after-school program at a Quaker meeting house in North Carolina, and that his mama told him he better behave himself when he was at this program. And he said, in fact, he did not behave himself at this program, and he gave a really hard time to the women who were running this after-school program at this Quaker meeting house. And there was a man who was the pastor of that local meeting who came and took him out of the program and sat him down in his office and just talked to him man to man. And he said that he remembered that guy and what he said for the rest of his life. I talked to this guy when he was in his 40s, and he said, that man's lessons have stuck with me forever. The work of a pastor. When I think about what is an evangelist or a prophet, one of the folks that I think about is a woman called Rachel Held Evans. She's not a friend, but she comes from evangelical Christianity. And one of her primary ministries was simply the fact that women carry ministries. And for those of us who have either always been friends or have been friends for a long time, this idea is not a shocking one. You know, it goes back to Margaret Fell. For the light is the same in the male and in the female, which cometh from Christ, he by whom the world was made. And so Christ is one and all and not divided. And who is it that dare stop Christ's mouth? I love that quote from Margaret, especially that last part. Who is it who dare stop Christ's mouth? I think that if Rachel Held Evans had ever heard that quote, which I'm not sure she did, she probably would have jumped out of her chair and celebrated. Rachel had an enormous impact on many, many women and some men in the world of evangelical Christianity, and was absolutely an evangelist and a prophet. For me, when I started experiencing what I can identify now as a call into ministry, it was actually a really difficult thing to figure out what it was that I was supposed to be doing. And the reason that was so hard in retrospect is that there wasn't really an available model for the type of work that I ended up doing. In the verses of Ephesians, one of the things listed is the concept of an apostle. And for the most part among Quakers, we don't really talk about apostles. It's not part of our day-to-day conversation. But eventually I found a woman, again, who some of you may have met, called Jan Wood, who has done a whole bunch of work in going through all of the gifts referenced in the New Testament and giving them all definitions that work in the 21st century. And this is how Jan defines the word apostle, the gift of being an apostle. She says, an ability and natural authority to care for or lead groups of organizations and communities of faith. In other words, the apostle works with groups of groups. It is the larger than local work. It is the systemic piece of understanding the groups of organizations of friends all over the place. Another way that I can phrase this is that until somebody gave me this definition of the word apostle, I legitimately did not understand that not every Quaker feels a personal responsibility for the welfare of the entire religious society of friends. This is how gifts tend to work. We don't know that our experience is unusual. And so we often don't see until somebody helps us, this is a unique contribution. For me, this particular type of work, this sort of apostleship function, did not lead to an institutional position. For some friends who have this gift, it does. I think this is where our really good general secretaries and superintendents come from. It's the folks who have that really strong gift of the groups of groups, of being able to care for the larger than local community. But for me, that did not end up being the pathway that occurred. So again, there was not an available model, and it was really confusing. I'm going to tell you the end of the story, and then I'm going to go back to the beginning. So the end of the story, or rather the now of the story, because I cannot imagine that it's over, because I'm still alive and still doing stuff. What I have discovered is that because I do not work for one specific organization, because I do not have an employer and a group of people to whom I am assigned, what that means is that I can work for everybody. And that's an amazing thing. Because I can go from friends in Australia to friends in Tanzania, to friends in the northern part of Scotland, to evangelical friends in Colorado, to liberal friends in Maryland, because I don't work for any of those groups. And what that allows is almost like a permission to go in and out of the different circles of who is affiliated with whom and who is not. It's also possible for me to create networks and connections because I have those relationships. So for example, a couple of examples. There was a time when I was in Europe and there was a young woman who was seriously considering stepping into a new piece of ministry. And she really, really needed a particular book. I knew of the existence of this book, and she needed this book in order to support her in having a conversation with her own meeting about what it was that she was called to do. But the book was out of print. And because I had the number of connections I had, I was actually able, within a span of about an hour, to find a Quaker somewhere in the area of Philadelphia, which is where she lived, who had this particular book on their shelf and was willing to loan it to her. And this despite the fact that at the time the question came up, I was in Europe. That's the kind of connection that is possible. There was another occasion that was a lot more serious. Some of you remember the day that Shadi Khoury was first arrested in the West Bank. And I got a phone call from Rania Maya asking me, can you identify, can you affirm the identity of this woman who has been contacting me from Italy who claims to be a Quaker reporter? Can you tell me whether she is for real? Should I give her the contact information of Shadi's family? And because I have done the amount of travel I've done and made these connections, I actually was able to say, yes, I do know that Quaker reporter in Italy, and I can say you should give her the contact information. This work of groups also means bringing people together across the different divisions that we have among friends. Sometimes this has looked like the Quaker parent groups, which were a function online during COVID. We had several hundred Quaker parents around the world who were isolated at home with their children and desperate for connection with other parents. One of the questions that came up in the process of that work was, well, what do you mean you're putting LGBTQ families and evangelical friend families in the same groups? Don't you think this is going to cause some problems? We know that this is going to be a difficulty. And I have to admit, I was worried about that too. But you know what actually happened when these parents connected across these divisions? We went 3 winters in a row of mixing all the theological groups of Quakers together, and we had 0 incidents of one family criticizing or attacking another for its position on matters like that one. Because everybody there decided the more important thing is to provide the mutual support and to care about each other. I can give an immediate response to things. Because I do not work for a particular organization, I don't have to wait for the moment that something that can be worked into a budget. So if there is an emergency need for a particular type of gathering or conversations about something that nobody is talking about, that's something I can put together right away because there isn't a need to wait. Going back to the beginning of the story for a minute. My home meeting is 15th Street meeting, which is in New York City. And this meeting had not experienced in living memory somebody coming to them and saying that they were experiencing a call to ministry and needed help in that discernment process. So we found ourselves recreating things like, how do you write a travel minute? How do you put together a clearness committee? How do you support somebody in the long term, spiritually, emotionally, physically, as they're doing work like this? My meeting did an incredible job of the discernment pieces. I'm skipping over a lot because it's a long story and it took literally years, but we got there and they did an amazing piece of work. But the thing that my meeting could not do was figure out the finances. It was a really difficult thing to know, how is it that a ministry like this is able to exist in the Quaker ecosystem that we have today? Because how was I going to continue to eat? Where was finance going to come from for medical care? These kinds of very basic questions. That's the role that Good News Associates eventually took. So I work for an organization legally, they are my legal employers, called Good News Associates, which is physically located in Washington State. And GNA is specifically designed to support non-institutional ministry. It's the kind of work that does not lead to a 9-to-5 job. And we are all very different people. There's an associate called Craig who is a prison chaplain and who also works with horses on his farm and helps people with spiritual formation through relationship with horses. There is an associate called Rosemary who is a Catholic in Albany, New York. She's also a nurse practitioner and provides primary care health care to people who have no other options. There's a woman called Chris who is a spiritual director and works one-on-one with folks around the world. I have to admit, I'm telling you about GNA partly because Lynn specifically asked, will you say something about Good News Associates and what does it do? But the larger spiritual principle that I want to connect with in terms of that particular organization is the question of, how is it among friends that we recognize and hold up and support ministry? Not necessarily the people, although that's part of it, but ministry, which is among all of us all the time. For some of us, it is a simple matter, not unimportant, but simple. Some ministries are the kind that can be supported with tender words and help with prayer, and that is enough for the friend to be able to step into the work that they are called to do. And in some cases, it is a much bigger question of trying to figure out how to make the connections and help people to develop into what they are called to do and the work that they're called to be doing in the world. How do we model what ministry is for folks who are newer or younger among friends? How do we tell the stories of what it looks like to step into what we might be called to do? And in particular, I want to go back for just a second to Ephesians. Christ himself gave the apostles, the prophets, the evangelists, the pastors and teachers. And I think there are more. I don't think that Paul was trying to make a complete list when he was writing that. I think there are more types of ministers. Christ himself gave the apostles, the prophets, the evangelists, the pastors and teachers to equip his people for works of service so that the body of Christ may be built up until we all reach unity in the faith and in the knowledge of the Son of God and become mature, attaining to the whole measure of the fullness of Christ. It is a pathway by which we collectively attain the whole measure of the fullness of Christ. And I guess that's what I want to leave us with. If we know that there are ministers and ministries among us, if that is a part that we are certain of, then how is it that we make it possible for folks to step into that in order to get to that place of spiritual maturity as a people together?
Thank you, Lynn, and thank you for that message, Emily. You've no doubt given us all a great deal to think about. We appreciate so much you joining us today and speaking to us. As always, we will continue on in silence for the remainder of our time together. We know that some have to leave us for other obligations, and for those of you who have to do that, we wish you well and hope you have a good week.
Thank you, Emily.
Thanks, Emily.
Thank you, Emily.
Thank you. It's very refreshing and encouraging to me that that we have people, yes, ministers, who can be confident and yet humble in their own path, but be trusting the sincerity of others and other paths as we go on our spiritual journeys. I think one of the problems that certainly the problems that we have are brought about when we define what the right way is and expect others to follow the right way that I'm in. And it's even worse when we become critical and separate ourselves from people that we don't trust or don't believe has the right answers for the way we handle our faith. It's one of the ways that I've treasured the experience of a Friends United meeting. There are many people I've met who have that kind of respect for other ways of living your life and following Christ's message. And I appreciate Emily's remarkable ability to see people as they are and accept them and love them. Jesus did that. Jesus didn't just choose one kind of person, one kind of path. He talked with Samaritans, he talked with Sadducees, and he talked with, and he may have understood them. He stood firm in his faith, but he was loving and kind and accepting and listening to all people. I want to be that way.
Friends, if all hearts are clear, we'll end meeting for worship.
Thank you all, and especially Emily.
Thank you, Emily.
Thank you.